Hey friend, welcome back to the show. This is What's Working Now. I'm your host, Katie. Have you ever felt, as an entrepreneur, as a marketer, like you are executing the proven strategies, the ones that the experts tell you to do, and yet it's not quite working? It can start to feel like you're in this shouting match with everybody else, fighting for the time, the eyeballs, the attention of your ideal customer and client. In a sense, it's like we're all fighting to get through the front door. Well, why not skip the front door and walk around to the side of the house and go in through the back door of your ideal customer and client? This is just a simple analogy of how I perceive today's guest, Cody Wittick, and his brilliant marketing approach. You know, I've experienced that where it feels like you're just in this shouting match and you're not going to win that game. And the brilliance of Cody and both the agency that he's built and the way that he's built it and the way that he helps people connect with their ideal customer and client, it's really brilliant. So whether or not you have considered influencer marketing, whether or not it even makes sense for you, what I am going to say is Cody thinks about marketing differently. And that's what I really want you to pay attention to here and start asking yourself, how can I break out of the groupthink? How can I break out of the way that you're currently thinking about your marketing? And how can the questions that Cody's asking in today's episode help spark new ideas, new approaches, and therefore new connections in your business? Let's hop into the show.
Hey, welcome back to the show. If you look at your product and service and ask yourself the question, I just need more people to see this. If I just had more people seeing this, then this company would grow. If that's the question you've been asking yourself, then you want to make sure you listen to today's conversation with Cody Wittick. Why? Cody is known for helping 8- and 9-figure companies significantly increase conversion. He utilizes things like ambassadors and influencers. Today, we're going to go deep on Cody's philosophy, why he does what he does, and specifically what's working now when it comes to marketing, ambassadors, influencers. How can you grow your business in a way that nobody else is? And oftentimes when we play the game the way everybody else is playing, it becomes the shouting match, right? We're trying to outdo everybody else. But what if there was a back door and you could go in the back door and people could learn about you in that new and interesting way? That is what we're talking about today with Cody Wittick. Cody, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. That was quite the intro.
Excited. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear specifically, I have a physical products company that I built 15 years ago, exited that company 7 years ago. Influencer marketing was a huge part of it. And I'm really curious to hear, how that business is working today and what you've found to be so effective. But before we jump into what's working now inside of influencer marketing, I want to hear a little bit about your story and get to know you better. And so tell us the story of an experience that has radically formed and shaped how you uniquely view the world today.
Experience. Just experience in my past life?
Yeah. Whatever comes up when I ask that question.
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is I did a long mission trip around the world when I first graduated college. It was called the World Race. It was 11 countries in 11 months.
Wow.
And yeah, it was crazy. See the world, do a lot of good stuff. It's not a denominational Christian mission trip, week training camp, and went with a bunch of people I didn't know. So it was great training for marriage too, because I got to live with women for like a year. But yeah, so when you talk like life-changing experience, that's like the first thing that comes to mind, of course. Like I came back a totally different person, just being in third world countries, seeing the things that I saw. Definitely made me appreciate America way more.
Wow.
And what we have here. So yeah.
So as a mom who has teenage kids, I'm really curious, was that something that your parents signed you up for, or you were like, I really want this?
No, they did not sign me up for that.
That was all you.
My dad wanted me to go to like get my master's, and I played college basketball and I was kind of just tired, and I went to a Christian university and had like 30 units of Bible and felt like I was like, man, I kind of already have experienced a lot of my head things, and I didn't really travel much growing up with my family. So as much of, I just want to go see the way that God's moving around the world, and you know, kind of just all that stuff. So see things that were going to break me, and yeah, that's how I felt. So definitely, my mama bear did not sign me up to have her son go around the world and be gone for a year and not see me for a year. So
yeah, that's a long time.
Idea.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool. It's really, I mean, of course, it makes me even more interested in getting to know you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that I've definitely noticed as I read about you and the work that you're doing is you're very purpose driven. Would you say that part of that stemmed from that experience? I mean, where does that come from, and why does the meaning behind what you're doing, why does it even matter to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's just something that is obviously tied to my faith, that I think more long term, and I guess having an eternal impact. But also, I think just some of the principles that, you know, I get to work for a company that I'm sure we'll touch base on, but also, yeah, just seeing like the ways that you can go about actually being in the marketplace and actually impacting human beings for a greater good, rather than just like money in my pocket, but actually like being a launch pad for them to go and learn and grow and achieve their dreams is something that's really powerful. And like a lot of the company culture that we really rally around is like creating belonging and celebrating stories. And so those are two like values that we really have. And a lot of companies just don't do. Like celebration is just something that I think often goes amiss, and people in America think that it's just like, oh, it's New Year's, so let's get drunk. Oh, it's Christmas, let's get drunk. Like it's all around certain things that are just, is it really celebrating? Is it really reflective? So like, for example, we have a celebrate meeting every Friday with our whole company where everybody goes around and shares like what they're personally and professionally celebrating. And it's just a good way to be actively cultivating that in your own life, and hopefully it's cultivating that in our employees' life to do that on our personal level, just in their outside of work as well. Because we just get so caught up. I mean, you know this, you know, just as well as I do, where you just get so caught up in like the next thing. Like, oh, we signed one client, we signed M&Ms. Okay, how can we go out and get the next one? Where you don't actually pause and celebrate. Like, we just signed M&Ms. Like, this is amazing. Let's go have a celebratory dinner or something like that. So people just don't stop. So that's what we're really trying to do, that I think is different.
And I love hearing how you don't just believe that needs to happen, but you're actively bringing it to your team meetings. And so that value that you personally have is being reflected in the way that you run your team, which I think is so important. And I think, you know, everybody who's listening to this, oftentimes high performers, there's like a mountain peak that we're going after, and we get close enough that we move the mile marker in a sense. And like, so by the time we get there, it's not even the goal and objective anymore. And to your point, we just move right past it. And I'm a big believer in what you're saying. I think it diminishes the significance of what we've done. And if we're diminishing that, then what happens to us over time if we don't let it in and celebrate it? I love what you're saying, Cody. What other values would you say that you have, and how are you bringing those to? Because it's one thing to have values, but it's another to actually infuse them into your business and actually be living them. And I think that's where people frequently struggle. It sounds like you've been quite intentional with that. Do you have other examples of how you're living your values?
Yeah, we try to. I mean, we're certainly not perfect, and we're also, you know, we're not a massive agency where the more that you grow, probably the harder it becomes. But I think these habits that we have built from when it was just me and my co-founder to first employee to second and so on, has made it easier to just, well, this is just something that out of the overflow of what we've already done. So it's easy to kind of just plant people into that culture. I mean, we have another, like our Monday meeting, in addition to kind of getting caught up for the week on like, hey, these are where our clients are at. But even our clients, we call them seats at a table because we want it to be like we're serving them. So we say it's like seats. So just intentional language around those things. And then we have gratitude on Mondays. So just sharing one thing that we're thankful for. So it's just small things. I would say it's tied around meetings. My partner, who's probably more on the client services side, he takes like every couple of weeks 10 to 15 minute just meetings, not about work, with each employee.
Get out.
Which is,
I love that.
Yeah. So we're spending a lot of time on culture to try to, and I think that's something that maybe people why keep working for us. So
yeah. Because what's happening, what people are experiencing is human, and there's a real connection there, and people will remember that. And it becomes a reason why to continue showing up. Money has value, but that value is fairly transactional and can be hollow and empty without these other components that you're talking about. And It's really powerful when you understand how to create value and revenue for a company and bring that human element. And it separates you. It's really cool. And to hear you talk about, oh, we don't have a huge agency, it's just, us and a couple people. I think that's amazing. Honestly, like, I think so often people are so focused on scale. We need more clients, we need more customers, and they lose themselves in that process. And I mean, I'm in a season where I had big companies and tremendous complexity, and I'm in a season now where I'm like, how about just me and one employee? And I heard James Clear even confess to Tim Ferriss. He's like, I only have one employee. And I'm like, James, like, you get me. So I think you can create so much value in the world with an elite group of the right people living these incredible values. I think it's amazing. And I think there's zero shame about it. I think it's beautiful.
I mean, Tim Ferriss, even he said, I think he only has like 3 people on his team.
Yep. Yeah. And the truth is, like, when you, and listen, there's a time and a place for all of the bigger company and the scale. But like, the older I get, the more I'm like, I just want it to be me and just the people I want and nobody else. And it's a beautiful thing when you can make those decisions. Part of how you got started is in the world of silicone wedding bands, and you were part of that company. Can you pronounce it for me, by the way? How did they say it?
Kalo.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, they were the innovators who first introduced the silicone wedding band, and it, like, part of the conundrum when it comes to marketing is sometimes you have to create desire for something, right? There's maybe not an immediate desire, or you have to educate people. I'm really curious, I know what my reaction was when that showed up on the market, but like, how did you ended up partnering with people like LeBron James and Dale Earnhardt Jr. to really promote this brand and this product. So tell us that process.
Yeah. I mean, especially with like I guess you would say a commodity product, which it now has become. When they first started, it wasn't a commodity. It was like they invented a category. It was like, what is silicone wedding rings? Like, it wasn't even a search term on Google. So they embedded the space. So early on, being first adopters, but very quickly it became like, how are you different from the $25 ring on Amazon? Well, they're really, like, technically, like, when it came to there's very marginal differences between those rings. Like, maybe we had a better manufacturer, maybe the quality of silicone was a little bit better, but like, realistically, if I pulled on it hard enough, it was going to break eventually. Maybe Kalo would last a little bit longer. So what became important was just the story and marketing of like why you were buying into Kalo. It's like the whole Simon Sinek thing. Start with why, right? Like, it wasn't the what, because on the what, it was just pretty much the same thing. So the why, I think a huge part of that was influencer before it was even called influencer. I mean, you're just talking before we started recording, like long before influence marketing. So those terms weren't really a thing, and it was definitely, but getting into people's hands was like the best way to go about it. It was just literally, and because, as you can imagine, the cost of goods on that was 2 cents on the dollar type thing. We could send out thousands a month and not even think about it. Like, I didn't even start tracking it until like the very, 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 very end, like how much we were seeding. But it would be so sending out products, getting it in people's hands. And that was certainly like a lot of my early like job role, was literally just like DMing people. At that time, it was a lot of people on Twitter, actually. I was expanding out of categories into outside of NFL because I guess you could say mentor at the time, he was a former NFL quarterback, had a lot of connections to NFL, used to play in the league. Just knew the agents, knew the players that were still playing. He had kind of that unlocked, but he was like, I don't know baseball. Like, I don't know NBA. I don't know all these other categories. And as you can imagine, there's married people everywhere. So it was just go out and get this thing to as many people as possible.
Well, I'm curious if you started to notice any sort of a pattern when it comes to, when you're inventing a new category and you're developing a brand out of thin air, which is what we do when we create a brand, and you are trying to create desire for that brand and the products and the values that it represents. You have to get traction somehow, right? And so what would you say were some key things that you guys did well to gain that traction? Because I can see how once you get a LeBron James on board, then it becomes a lot easier to get the next guy, right? But what are some key things that you do in the beginning with a new brand and a new product to create that traction and get interest from these influencers and buyers?
Yeah, I think the temptation is with like a product that can go into a lot of different categories is to kind of just be everywhere. Kayla did a really great job of, when I first started, they were just diving into CrossFit, and CrossFit was still like in its infancy of like really, now it's like this behemoth of a category.
Yeah.
Back in 2014, it was like really starting to get legs. And there was things like on audience insights on Facebook and a lot of these different things that we saw that CrossFit was just a very, very highly married. And it was at that time, their tagline, Kayla's tagline was the silicone wing for the active lifestyle. So active lifestyle, CrossFit. And so we did a really good job of like creating a product for that category. They had a kettlebell on the silicone wedding ring. We sponsored podcast, Girls Gone WOD. We picked an ambassador that wasn't like the biggest person, but it was like a very well-known and very connected ambassador.
Okay.
So that go into that strategy. We sponsored at the CrossFit events, like games. We seeded product to a bunch of different gyms and boxes and athletes. So it was like what I would say a full circle approach. It was like, hey, we're here and we care about the category. We care about the community. We're not just like trying to get a dollar, but we're like here to live and breathe. And so much so that we created a product for you. So I think that was like a huge momentum piece early days.
Super smart. I was just interviewing John Lee Dumas's wife, and she said something similar, like, gotta really niche down. And I think it's smart to pick an environment like CrossFit. To your point, it was super relevant to the product. They were a tight-knit community. It was almost like, I don't know, the rebels, the outcasts, the misfits in a way. And there's like a fun energy with that. So it's really cool because to your point, that product, you could paint a similar story in so many different categories. And it was important that you guys picked one, really focused on that, got a toehold, and then you could expand from there. So you were with Kalo for several years, and then you shifted over to your current agency, which is Kynship. Tell me about Kynship, how you made this move, and why what you do now is so important to you.
Quick question for you. What would happen in your business and life if you could show up powerfully? As a coach to high-performing entrepreneurs, I help intelligent people like you do just that. And if you want to be inspired by people who are getting more done in 90 days than most people do all year, I'm going to invite you to go check out my case studies. The website is now.katyrichardson.com/case study. And the cool thing is we've got so many case studies there. You can find an entrepreneur who's just like you. I've also got a link for you down in the show notes. Okay, back to the show.
Yeah. I think I made the move from Kalo, quite honestly, probably just from job dissatisfaction. I had just gotten recently married, and I was just thinking a lot about, okay, what do I want my career to be? I started to think around, do I just want to jump ship to like a bigger brand, like a Stance of the world or a Nike, and do influencer there? And talking to another mentor of mine, he was just like, I think you should start your own agency. And I laughed in his face. I had never.
How old were you?
I had never. I got married at 26, 2018. Yeah, 26. I just turned 27. And so, yeah, I don't know why, but like I've been a leader, like captain, leader, and all these different other things in my life. I just never associated with the word like entrepreneur. I never thought of myself as like starting my own business. But this idea just dropped in my lap. I laughed in his face out of probably my own insecurity and uncomfortability. Unbeknownst to me, he was having another conversation with my co-founder now today, and basically said the same thing to him. And I think he had actually already, thought about starting his own business. So he was kind of on the different spectrum than me. And yeah, we joined up. This mentor was the co-founder's brother of Kalo. So very loose connection, same paid media agency. Started Kynship and just went for it. Jumped in January 2019, influencer and paid ads. And that was kind of like our sweet spot. But I mean, over the first probably half of our agency, we were just throwing stuff on a wall to see what sticks. And oh, this is selling. All right, now we have a business. let's scale it. So yeah, just so many like questions around like how are we going to package stuff? What is our sales deck? Like all these different things that were pretty much just my nerves around jumping in. But everything that I love around why it's important to me, and I think is just it's the things that we were talking about open the show with. That's what's keeps me going. And it's just fun to constantly be like, here's an idea, implement it. Not 12 hoops to jump through, not the corporate ladder, but like direct impact, direct ROI or failure. The buck stops with you. And I love that pressure. And it reminds me of being an athlete in sports. So
cool.
It's like the closest thing that you can get to, like, I guess a game feeling is like the day-to-day of running your own show.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I could feel the energy of kind of having that realization. We don't need to go into my story, but it was kind of similar. I didn't pursue entrepreneurship because I always had dreamed of being an entrepreneur. It was kind of this realization and suggestions from other people. So it's fun to kind of discover that ability that's within you, even though you hadn't necessarily had that vision for yourself the whole time. And it's an exciting time to make that unexpected decision and make that leap into the unknown. Like,
right.
I love that. It's so cool. Fun to hear you talk about that. Influencer marketing, when you started, it wasn't really even a thing when you started at Kalo, and then you've now made it a huge part of Kynship. There's a lot of different variables when it comes to marketing, ambassadors, influencers. To speak to the title of the show, what's working now inside of influencer marketing? Like, I know for a while it was like everything and easy, and it was like this amazing thing. Right. And then it turns out influencers aren't always the best business people, and they make these huge promises to companies and then they don't deliver on them. And it's just kind of like, oh, well, whatever. How have you, because what it seems like you've done is you've done a really good job of not just helping the transaction to happen, but to like really develop meaningful relationships between brands and influencers. So tell me how you approach facilitating this kind of thing.
It's just the product. You got a product. We want to put that in those people's hands if they are wanting to receive it. And then the process continues from there, like in a natural progression. I compare it to dating a lot. It's like when you reach out to ask somebody on a date, are you asking for everything in the world? No, you're probably and then also asking them to like pay for the bill. Like that's probably not going to go very well. But that's usually like the traditional model is like, hey, I'm Cody. I'm so awesome. This is my brand. We're so awesome. Even though you've never heard of me, will you post 3 times? Like great first impression.
Right.
So rather than just allowing the product to, and it's really just out of impatience. It's just owners, founders, not knowing anything, being too impatient with like, oh, every dollar I spend, every hour I spend, I need to have an ROI. But it's just allowing the product to speak for itself. Like let that be the ethos of why there's a partnership that materializes. So we're doing that at scale. for our clients, for e-commerce brands, we're reaching out to 500 influencers. We're on average, we're seeing 100 influencers actually opt in and say, yes, send me the product. And 30 of them will still post for free without us even asking. And then we follow up for usage rights. And then we want to get that content to the ad account. So there's a whole process. I mean, we have a business for a reason, but the long-term and long tail effect of having human beings talking about you is critical to a brand. I mean, I could probably listen to you and your story, and it sounds like that's what you have. So it's just, but people are too impatient to get there. And so what they end up settling for is pay for posts. Hey, Katie, here's $500 for a post. Oh, it didn't actually achieve anything. No, duh. Usually doesn't. So you just constantly have to be finding more people, and you end up with a transactional nature of influence marketing that still is existing. But I'd say people are getting smarter. Brands and influencers are getting more savvy in terms of the fact that they want to have long-term partnerships. So, the rule of threes, maybe you're doing 3 posts. I haven't heard Tim Ferriss, speaking of him, talk about that, where it's he doesn't do one-off sponsorships. He has to have 3 readings at a minimum for him to work with a sponsor. So it's he understands the first one might bomb because Trump says something stupid on that day and no one listens to the podcast, or example, so there's just different things that affect performance. So certainly that market is going towards that, more longevity, long-term, which is good. More focus on the content as well. Sorry, I'm just rambling at this point. So
no, you're not rambling. No, you're not rambling. Something that I really appreciated when I was reading on some of your companies was how you don't work on the surface and you really like to go deeper. And if you're open to it, I would like to go a little bit deeper with you. And I'm really curious about this combination of a man of faith who's in a committed marriage. And you even mentioned you have a child on the way any day now. Your wife's going to be having your first baby. And from what I have learned, you have a small team that is relying on you. You have clients and customers who are relying on you. In a lot of ways, you could be sitting here feeling like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. And I would love if you're open to sharing some of the ways in which you navigate that tremendous complexity. There's a lot of stress when it comes to carrying and volunteering to carry the weight and responsibility that you do. And I think it benefits other people the more that we get to understand what's the nuance to how you're doing what you're doing. And so I'd love, I feel like I haven't asked a very specific question yet, but what are some key things that you feel that you do? Maybe they're just no big deal to you, but they're kind of critical for you being able to navigate the dynamics of the complex life that you have.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, one of the first things that come to mind is just the sooner that I realize that I'm not the end all be all is when I'm way more set up for success, and I don't have the answer for everything. I oversee sales and marketing at Kynship. I'm not some sales and marketing guru. I work with someone on sales front that built an agency, built a sales department. He actually gives me advice and I write down everything, and he's getting me better. So it's kind of like coaching. I mean, it's what you're doing. It's how you're working with founders. Entrepreneurship is really lonely. It can be really isolating. So if you don't have advisors around you, it's the book of Proverbs says plants succeed with many advisors and they fail without them. It's just straightforward. It's just you can have it becomes really simple in terms of making decisions or making plans, that if you don't have advisory around you, it's really, really hard. So that's one thing, is just recognizing out of my own ego and pride, I could say, I know all the things, or I want the credit alone. I don't want to say that I got this from somebody else. But then it's just the anxiety is really strong. The weight of the decision is really heavy. So that's one of the first things that comes to my mind, is recognizing that I'm not the end all be all. And that goes into my faith too, is just surrendering that. The outcomes, I think, is you can do so much and you don't control the outcome. So
yeah,
it's yeah, I would just say those are the first things that come to my mind. I mean, we can get into like calendar and everything like that, but like just having some focuses around those things too kind of eases the anxiety. But
we'll go there. Tell me about your calendar now that you mentioned it. I'm quite curious.
oh man, I am not perfect on this either, but my best days are when I'm actually just wanting to get one thing done.
Okay.
Maybe 2 to 3. It's like, here's my first thing. This is what I want to get done. And yeah, it's like an ebb and flow of trying to protect my calendar as much as possible too, from like the most important things to make sure that it's not stacked with calls or different things like that. So that's been helpful to, when you talk about like the burden, the weights, like there's a lot riding on you and all this stuff. The growth of the agency, achieving our goals. Just how can I be a good steward of today? And what does that look like? So that's where the calendar comes in, I think.
I love it. I appreciate how open you have been about your faith and how much it influences you. I'm curious if you can think of a story, an example where maybe it's something that you learned in business that helped you in your faith, or vice versa. It's something that I'm really passionate about as well. And I really feel we can't compartmentalize life. And I feel like life, God, the universe is always teaching us really important lessons. And I'm curious if you found a gem in there. Sometimes we use our faith in new ways or unexpected ways in our business. And maybe, like, I can think personally of times where I got in a really critical situation where something had to happen fast, and literally it brought me to my knees, and God taught me some beautiful lessons in that moment. And yet it's business, right? It didn't seem like a spiritual moment in the beginning, but it became spiritual because of my need and to surrender. And I was able to learn a beautiful lesson in that moment. And I'm just curious if you've ever experienced those moments. I think, to your point, entrepreneurship can be really lonely, and it can bring us to our knees. And sometimes the only person with the answer is the guy up above. So
I laugh because it's like there's countless times, honestly. I'd say like just seeing the power of prayer. Like my partner and I pray together weekly, and seeing answered prayers to getting a loan for our business, getting, like, during COVID. I mean, that was like, we were in the infancy of our agency, just seeing like we got the PPP loan. And I remember like that loan hitting our bank account and being like, what the heck happened? Like God's hand has been all over our business for sure. I mean, for a long time, we gave 10% of top line away just for like charitable efforts or things that were on our heart, like, and seeing God be faithful through that sacrifice of, like, I guess you could call it like the tithe, through that has just been awesome. And there's been times where it's like, that's been like really stretching to be like, well, we could probably use that cash. So we don't do it anymore due to other circumstances, and we want to get back to doing other stuff around be generous, because a lot of our philosophy is built on that generosity principle. But countless times. Yeah,
that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for asking all these questions. It's fun.
I'm really curious about people's habits. So what's something that you do consistently every day, Cody?
CrossFit. Speaking of CrossFit, not every day. I'd be very sore, but I do it like 5 times a week. I drink out of the same water bottle. I use the same salad bowl for my big ass salad that I have every day for lunch.
That's cool.
It's kind of silly, but honestly, like making those, like eliminating some of those small, very small decisions out of my day actually eliminates some of the mind share that kind of piles up when there's tons of other small decisions that you make throughout the day. So those are certainly some habits that are big that just keep me sane and healthy. So every lunch, like after this podcast, I'll go back home and work out. eat, come back to the office. Like, so
I love
that's
it.
one of the biggest things that I really enjoy and gives me life and gives a good break to the workday.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. I love books and I listen to most of my books, but in that vein, I've found that there are some books that stay on my nightstand that I like to read them, once a year. And I'm curious if there are books in your life like that, where maybe you find yourself gifting it frequently, or you've read it more than a couple times. What are those books in your life?
All the books I've read multiple times. Well, one of the I love. I can't even think of his name now. So I actually won't even mention him.
It was there was a face rub there.
Yeah, like, man, he's a very famous author. That's why it's embarrassing.
Oh, okay.
He wrote Blink and help me out. Blink and
Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Outliers.
Malcolm Gladwell books. Yeah, Outliers.
Okay.
Yeah, love those books. There's a book. This ties back into faith called The Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard. I've probably read that 4 or 5 times.
That's new to me.
Yeah, it just talks about the Sermon on the Mount. Breaks that down throughout the book. What does it mean to actually follow Jesus? What does that look like? And yeah, those are some of the consistent ones. Of course, I'm reading a lot about parenting right now. Boundaries with Kids by Dr. Henry Cloud. That's something that I'm rereading. But
okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Awesome. Okay, last question for you. And maybe you have an answer for this one, maybe you don't. But I want to go back to some of those critical moments in business or life where it's like, how am I going to get past this? And I've found oftentimes there's some advice that either somebody gives us in that moment or somebody gave us advice at some time in our moment that helped us gain clarity in that critical moment. Do you have some advice that somebody shared, wisdom that really helped you in a critical time in your life? Maybe a scripture, a saying, a phrase that you reference a lot?
Something that stuck with me is something that my brother's told me before, where he was like, the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing.
Wow.
I don't know. I think you probably heard it from somewhere else too, but
sure.
Yeah, it was definitely around a certain like business decision around like, yeah, I guess without going into it, it was pretty critical around like, or we were actively thinking about whether this was the right timing of it.
Okay.
So yeah, the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing.
Wow.
That stuck with me as just like an easy phrase to remember. Like,
yeah,
timing is more important than it being like the right mechanism to actually achieve what you're looking to achieve. So,
Cody Wittick, this has been an incredible conversation. Where are you most active? I found you on LinkedIn. I also found you on Instagram. We'll have links to those. Is there another place that you want us to link people to?
Twitter and LinkedIn is where I'm most active.
Twitter. Ooh, I like that. Okay. Twitter.
Yeah, get on Twitter.
I'll follow you on Twitter. I know I'm kind of on it, but not really. I'm more of like, I just snoop around, but I don't have a presence on Twitter, and I probably should.
I don't know what mechanism you work in, but like a lot of those founders where you coach people would be on Twitter, at least in
they
my
are.
world.
Oh, I know they're on Twitter and they don't know that I exist. Sometimes lurking in the shadows is like a nice place to be.
Yeah, that's true.
No, that's funny. Okay, so, and the other thing I wanted to mention is your agency. We talked about it a couple of times, Kynship. You guys help 8 and 9 figure. I mean, do you work with smaller companies as well?
Yeah, I think everybody's goal is to become the 8 to 9 figure. So depending on the level of size of the 7-figure brands, certainly would take a call if you guys are listening to this.
Okay. So if you're listening and you're like, influencer marketing, I've tried that on my own and I've really fallen flat on my face. Reach out to Cody. And especially if you, like Cody, are Christian and you have deeper purpose and meaning behind what it is that you're doing, like reach out to them. I think what you have shared about you and your founder, how you guys operate with your team, what value you bring to your clients and customers, I think it's really unique and special. And to me, like that's the best. That's the reason I do what I do. It's to meet people like you. It's to have those relationships, to enrich life and to be a light in the world. And you're a beautiful example of that. So Cody, thank you so much for today's conversation. And for everybody who's listening, this is what's working now.